Welcome, everyone, to episode 6 of the What Sales and Marketing Got to Do with It podcast. My name is Gemma Adair, founder and principal marketing consultant of Riata Consultancy. This podcast aims to delve deep into the minds of sales and marketing industry leaders, uncovering what keeps them up at night, what drives their passion, and how they execute successful strategies in both their personal and professional lives. I'm delighted to welcome Daley Robinson, Marketing Director at Inflowing, who are a specialist B2B marketing agency. I'm sure Daley will tell us so much more than what I've just covered off in that introduction there, but great to have you, Daley.
No, that's totally fine. It's been great to be invited, Gemma. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So gonna ask you just a quick question: coffee or tea?
Coffee. Just one though in the morning. I'm very sensitive to caffeine, and if I have more than one, then bad things happen. So one coffee, very strict. And then if I was maybe having a bit of brunch, I might have a mug of tea.
Awesome.
But other than that, water.
Brilliant. So please, let's kick off. So please introduce who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you quite rightly said at the top of the call, Gemma, I'm Daley Robinson. I'm marketing director currently at Inflowing. So we're a B2B marketing agency working with lots of different companies across different sectors and sizes. I'm very old, so I've been working in marketing now for about 20 years. So kind of my first marketing job, I remember there being one computer in the office that had the internet and you had to wait for everybody to use that computer. So
now you're really showing your age.
Absolutely. And so I'm absolutely struggling to contextualize my perspective in this new world of AI and stuff, and kind of wondering if I'm a dinosaur now. But no, so yeah, been doing marketing for quite a long time. Still love marketing, and yeah, a lot of time client side, but most recently agency side.
Perfect. And tell us a bit more. I'm really curious to understand a bit more about what that journey looks like from client side to agency. Like, how did that all come about, wanting to kind of go agency side and run your own agency?
Yeah, well, I think it was. I think the contributing factor was pretty much having an emotional breakdown during that transition, really, which I'll very candidly share my experiences in doing that. So,
please do.
I mean, I think if I go right back to the very beginning,
Please,
there's no boyhood dream to become a marketer. I was just too impractical and useless to do anything with my hands, and not quite intelligent enough, I don't think, to kind of go and become a barrister or a medical person or anything. So I bumbled my way through school and ended up with pretty average scores. Messed around a lot at school. Went to college, messed around a lot at college. So I was kind of left at 18, unemployed for about a year. So I was literally there, in the job office every week, signing on, and just literally spent a year applying for literally any jobs whatsoever. So I could have easily have been here on the, what's accountancy got to do with it, or what's HR got to do with it, because I was literally applying for any office-based jobs where I could go in, make some tea for a few years, maybe build a relationship or rapport with somebody who might then offer me a better job at some point. But certainly back in those days, it was quite common to have office juniors and typists and audio typists and stuff like that. So I was literally just applying for anything, Gemma. So it was complete chance, I think, that I ended up in marketing. And I'd got to the point where I'd been unemployed so long that even my mum's tolerance was getting tested, and she was pretty tolerant, I think, at the time. And I got to the point where I basically started applying to do undergraduate degrees and got accepted onto a program. And then I just saw one more job and I thought, well, I've already got my place at uni. There's no harm in applying for this other role. And that happened to be the one that I secured after 12 months of filling in these applications. So yeah, that was a marketing and communications assistant role for a charity. Okay. So I started there, £150 a week, on the then government's New Deal program, which was their return to work program for people who'd been long-term unemployed. So effectively started there. My boss left after 3 weeks, which I didn't take personally, but I could have been a contributing factor for sure. So I kind of went in reporting to this business development manager with no experience in marketing whatsoever. Not only that, supposedly, I was unemployable, so I probably needed a lot of support in making that transition. My boss left to become a teacher, which again, I'm not taking personally, but that then left me in a sink or swim type situation. And I think it just so happened that I managed to swim. And I think through the nature of the beast, not having anybody else to show me, I just kind of started to immerse myself into the role and have a go at doing everything. I worked for a really supportive team and an organization, just started learning by doing, and I ended up administering the very beginnings of the website and kind of teaching myself how to write press releases and licking a lot of envelopes and probably developing a chronic tongue disorder at some point, as you used to back then, having to kind of lick a load of envelopes, which was probably sounds weird to any millennials listening, but that was what we used to do back in the day. And yeah, just kind of doing all of that, I guess, dirty stuff within marketing that you have to do when you're learning a role. And we literally have no money, so you had to do everything yourself. And I think probably a good grounding in marketing, a good general role to learn the ropes. So that was that. I think did that for about 5 years. Wanted to earn some more cash, and being in the not-for-profit sector is probably not the best place to be if you're trying to get a house sorted and stuff, get on the property ladder. So again, spamming any kind of job roles whatsoever. Could have easily ended up in any sector, applied for roles in universities, councils.
Wow.
Landed in IT. I remember talking about liking gaming in this interview, which my boss at the time, who's now very senior within Salesforce, must have liked that kind of techie element to my characteristic. And although not a techie, I'd always been very technically minded.
Yeah.
My dad was kind of involved in web design and stuff. He gave me a computer as a teenager when I was 14, which was probably a really bad idea with no safeguarding or whatever. But you learn a lot about computers during that time. So, I may have been exposed to some horrific things during my formative years, but I learned a lot about computers and the internet and stuff in the very beginning. So that was, again, a good thing to happen. And nothing terrible happened, which is a good thing. So, yeah, so ended up in technology, moved around a bit every couple of years, as you do when you're trying to kind of get ahead and develop. Ended up in a marketing director position within a technology reseller. So, and then, yeah, after about 15 years client side, most of which had been in technology, without going into detail, minor disagreement within the role. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of, the emotional breakdown, I think, came after a realization that I'd been prioritizing for a very long time, this rat race, and going off, and I was commuting ridiculous miles and doing ridiculous times. I was on the road for 3 hours every day without fail.
Wow.
This was before any mass adoption of any kind of hybrid stuff or work from home. So effectively in the office 5 days a week. I had at the time a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I think with the 3-year-old, I think I'd been to the nursery that he attended twice, once to select it, and then I think I managed to get to one Christmas party once. Other than that, never been. Never did the drop off, never did the pick up, never managed to go to any of these other activities that they obviously do as well-intentioned early years practitioners. So he effectively just pretty much missed that, because I used to leave when he was in bed, get back when he was in bed, and then the next day I would leave when he was in bed, get back when I was getting in bed. And I think when it all kind of unraveled within that role, I just experimenting in these float tanks that were popular at the time. I think it was still reasonably popular, and I just came out crying. I was just a blubbering mess, and I feel really sorry for the guy who worked in there, because he was having to do the shoulder to cry on thing, and I was really angry and resentful, I think, at myself for having got my priorities wrong. So then I think in terms of that transition, when I left client side, all I knew, Gemma, at that time was I definitely didn't want to work or start a marketing agency. I was
Right.
like, this is definitely not what I want to do. There are 10,000 marketing agencies out there that, you know, it's undifferentiated, it's kind of messy, and
Yeah.
I just don't want to do it. I don't know what I want to do, but I don't want to do that.
Saturated. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I was like, you would have to be, you know, kind of not quite there to want to do that. And I'm definitely not going to do that. So then, you know, I started interviewing for a load of roles, and what I mean, I was really into VR at the time because that was the new thing at that time, which was 6 years ago now. And I was interviewing for a head of Europe position at quite a big technology vendor that's involved in that space. And it was as always, living in Nottingham, it was a massive drive down to the M4 corridor to, you know, somewhere in Berkshire or wherever. And all I could think about at that time was starting a marketing agency. And I was thinking, well, I'm going down here to this supposed ideal job in this area that I want to work in. And I've absolutely closed off that opportunity in my mind before I'd even considered it. And as I was going down, I was just thinking, actually, you know, my interface with agencies has been quite bad in this way, this way, and this way. And actually, if you did this, this, and this differently, then that would be better.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like mentally processing this on the 3-hour drive down to Reading or wherever it was. And I got into the interview. Luckily, I must have been terrible because I did not get offered a second interview, and I did not get offered the role. But in the end, I didn't really care. So I think, you know, maybe my maybe my inability to impress during those meetings was a good thing, because actually after that I was kind of like, actually I'm not going to apply for any more jobs, and I'm going to see what happens here. So basically, Gemma, I had no customers, no. I think if anybody else was considering going agency side, I would strongly recommend getting a few things teed up before you do. But I had nothing. I had no leads, no commitments,
Nothing at all.
No, it was just kind of like, right, I'm going to do this. And I had a little bit of cash as a compromise agreement, I think, from for a previous role, and then effectively use that. So I gave myself a 3-month runway. I said, that's the investment into the company. You got 3 months to make it work. And month 3, got the first customer.
That's brilliant.
Then about 2 months later, actually got, you know, a more meaningful customer, and then I was off and running. But yeah, so that was the kind of journey, I think to that stage. So
and here you are to present day.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Disheveled and aged and still alive.
So you mentioned there, could you maybe touch on 1 or 2 of the challenges, or perhaps you mentioned there about you could have set yourself up a bit better and stuff like that. It was very much so you kind of didn't quite expect, you know, what was to come, or you didn't kind of foresee any of the kind of sort of challenges that you were going to sort of entail. And sort of getting customers obviously is one of the big challenges, right? It's having that sort of revenue, money coming into the bank. I mean, it's critical, right? It's like it's very critical. Yeah. What were the other sort of challenges, if you look back in it now and you think, oh, if I'd maybe prepared myself a little bit more on that,
in terms of that managing that transition?
Yeah.
So I think probably the people that, to be frank, succeed and do really well in agencies often come from agency side. So they've kind of managed to hone their skills and develop a real detailed understanding of the processes, to detailed understanding of operationally how you kind of administer that, probably most importantly how you do that profitably. And obviously there's a black book of interactions that have happened over time, and some goodwill that's come from, I mean, presumably, let's just say you're a digital strategist in a digital marketing agency, and that agency is successful. You've left some pretty positive imprints of service by that point. Otherwise, you would never make it to that point. And, you know, to be frank, you'd have been sacked a long time ago. So if it becomes a case that you end up successful in an agency, I think those are the people that, you know, would probably at some point get to the point where they're kind of like, well, I'm making all this money for other people, so I mean, I've got these 3 people that I know, and they go and have a coffee and do all these illegal things to set themselves up for the future, and then when they hand the notice in, there's kind of a bit of churn and whatever. But so I think that's almost what you'd do if you were going to design this. And if you're an investor individually looking for individuals to invest in starting an agency, that's what you'd look for, right? As a track record and capabilities and experience in doing that. And I had the complete opposite. I had no experience whatsoever agency side. There's at the beginning, there's no real firm business plan. It was just the central ideology behind it was, at the time, there was a load of HubSpot agencies doing inbound. And at the time, I think there's about 3 or 4 ABM agencies. And the central notion initially was, so you either pay your 4 or 5 grand a month with a HubSpot agency, which means you have HubSpot, whether it is or is not correct for your business. And I love HubSpot, by the way. I think it probably is correct for a lot of businesses, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And then secondly, you've got these ABM agencies, which at the time was give us 60, 70 grand and we'll do you a 3-month campaign model. So I was kind of like, well, actually, what would it look like if it was 3 or 4 grand a month? And actually, depending on the organization, it's quite likely the demand generation strategy might be a combination of both of those things, because in some markets, there's a small number of players, they're higher value, more strategic. And then in other markets that companies operate in, it's more tactical, there are more organizations, it's harder to reach out to those individuals directly. So it was kind of like, well, actually, most organizations probably need a combination of both. At the time, there was no agencies that were combining both of those. It was like you're either inbound or account-based marketing. And the reality is most organizations were probably both, or should have been both. So that was the central ideology. And that's effectively all I had was that. And then I think that was then coupled with my experiences of spending 3 grand with this type of agency, 3 grand with that type of agency, 40 grand on a new website, and then 6 months down the line, it's not working, and you get everyone around the table and they go, well, you only pay us to do this bit. If your issue was SEO, and then you speak to the SEO agency, and then the SEO agency goes, well, we didn't develop the website, and because the website wasn't developed with X, Y, and Z, it's not our fault. And there's kind of spending like £1 million a year on marketing, and there was no real accountability. So that was the other part to it, which was this kind of, to make sure accountability was there, and everyone was open and honest and transparent, but also that there was, in the design of the service, there was nowhere to hide behind that lack of accountability, which I think the skill, and not all agencies like this, by the way, some fantastic agencies out there, but I think there are some that kind of hide behind that and to use that to protect the commercial aspect of it, and that sometimes is to the detriment of customer success.
That makes sense. I think definitely. And I think for myself, I've had experience with good and bad, and different skill sets, different agencies which offer different things and different services and so on. So it's like everything really. There's good, bad. There's also the ugly.
Sure. But I think in terms of summary, Gemma, if anybody was looking to start a marketing agency, just do the complete opposite of what I did. Like, be prepared, be planned, do some work beforehand, and don't hand your notice in until you're confident that there's an 80% chance of success. Whereas I'd probably got an 8% chance of success, and I was relying on brute energy and effort, which gave me some I'm being serious when I say it gave me some horrific infections, one of which was quite a serious eye infection because I was not getting enough sleep, and I was doing all the things that these hustle people tell you to do, which is burn the midnight oil, and I was going to bed at 11, and I was getting up at 4 to work out and this and that, and it effectively made me really ill. So I think I was trying to outwork a lack of preparedness in doing it. I think sense. Definitely, if you want to protect your relationship and your house, make sure that you've done a lot of work on it before you hand your notice in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's some really, really good advice. So what does a day in the life of Daley look like now?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess the cliche is that no 2 days are the same, and I think the reality is that it was that expectation, I think, that brought me agency side. So I think there was this romantic ideology that agency side, you just, all you're doing is kind of coming up with ideas, and you're just being really creative, and you spend all your time pitching, and there's lunches thrown in, and you kind of get hammered all day on Fridays, and kind of sack off on a Monday because you can't be bothered to go in. And that was, I think, what brings people agency side is probably, they're often fighting maybe a little bit of things feeling a little bit samey when you're client side, and maybe lacking a bit of the creativity, or you don't get involved in the creative bit because that's an agency, or it's done over in the States and you're just kind of responsible for operationalizing someone else's ideas. So I think what brought me and everybody else over agency side is, you think, right, we're just going to be doing these crazy briefs, and we're going to be going in and wearing sandals with socks, and kind of talking conceptually about meaning. And certainly in my experience, that's not been the case, but that might be because I'm nowhere near as successful as a lot of other people doing this. So I think in my experience, it's as operational as it is in-house. It's a very small percentage of time that you do on that kind of, okay, this is kind of the creative part of ideation and coming up with new ideas. And a lot of the time it's just people, and it's the same as in-house, in respect of most of the day you're kind of dealing with challenges and issues, and you're firefighting, and you're making sure that, and overseeing and making sure that the communication is really good. And making sure that you're managing risk, and that risk can be internal and external, to make sure that you're managing expectations and delivering on those expectations. And yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm going to talk a lot about kind of realizations, but I think particularly when you found any business, I think there's this idea that, okay, I'm not going to be anybody's bitch anymore. I'm just my own boss now. So actually, no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to get up at 11. And again, the reality is you are somebody's bitch. You're just now customer's bitch rather than your boss's bitch, right? So it's kind of like I've again come a real pleasant realization is that you're always somebody's bitch somewhere. And I think it sounds disempowering, but it's actually really empowering to understand that you've really got to invest in those relationships, and really got to spend time to kind of help set, manage, and kind of deliver against expectations. And that's the same whether you're client side or agency side. Nothing is different in regards to that. So I think in terms of day, there's a lot of that's very predictable. And I run a sauna, but a sauna basically runs my life. So there's some things that happen quarterly, some things that happen weekly, some things that happen daily. But there's a routine, a very regimented routine behind a lot of what happens. And even when it appears creative, there's a real process behind making sure that it happens. So definitely. Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of my time is actually calls, coordination, planning, and reporting, really. So it's kind of
those three sort of different areas.
It's probably all the stuff that people hate about working in-house, and they think they can get away from by going agency side, that you still have to do agency side.
Gotcha. Because that was another thing on my questions, like what area do you like and what area do you dislike with what you currently do right now? So what area do you like doing?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, as you can probably tell by now, I can talk.
That's fine.
So I can talk.
No, it's good. It's definitely good, and that's the thing. I think with the marketing, with the whole kind of marketing, or what you like and what you don't like, I think you're giving a whole lot of nuggets from what you're saying. So I'm good with that.
I can talk, but I think there's again another kind of thing that you realize, I think, once you've been working in marketing for a while, and I'm sure you probably feel the same, is a kind of acknowledgement that a lot of people they're just all hearts and minds, So it doesn't matter what you write, or it doesn't really matter what the substance is behind a lot of stuff. It's about how it's communicated and bringing that to life.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I think the people who are really successful in marketing, they talk about storytelling now, but effectively what they're doing is igniting the hearts and minds of people internally and externally in support of commercial objectives. And I think, I'm not putting myself into the kind of category of excellent people to do that, but I think it's something, it's a part of the role that's necessary. It's a part of the role that I enjoy. And it gets you enthusiastic and positive. And I think anything, even if it's on a call like this, Gemma, anything that gets you kind of in this mode of evangelist, I think is really
Yeah,
good, because you come off
exactly.
a call and you're kind of hyped up, and you want to play with the kids, or you want to do a workout or whatever, so you're kind of ready to go. Whereas
It's
a lot of
brilliant.
the other,
Yeah. I think it's energy is important, right? And just to kind of like, having that kind of conversation where you can just kind of share ideas and brainstorm, and I think energy is very important to a conversation, a relationship. It's kind of like it's two-way. It's kind of it's just really important to kind of take it up a notch and take it that, like, extend that further. And I think that's where marketing or content or anything creation, it's like, how do I take it further? Like, how do I how do you relate that to target audience, the persona, the customer, the client, and it's about taking them on that journey with you, whatever that might look like. So I definitely agree. From your experience, what are the misconceptions? I think you've talked a lot about sort of agency. There's a lot of misconceptions about agency, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever that might look like. Um, what do you think? What do you think the misconceptions are about marketing?
sure, yeah.
There you go.
Um, Look, I think a lot of the common complaints about the misconceptions of marketing I kind of disagree with, really, and I have a pretty, I just don't entertain. I've worked in house organisations, right, where I've been referred to as a colouring in department. That for me was not it didn't cause any issues. I wasn't hurt by that.
Yeah, yeah,
And actually, I mean, it kind of, some of what we do is colouring in. So it's hard to complain about colouring in if your role is graphic design, because yeah, there's a lot more that you do, and you have to do this and that and originate the art. There is an element of marketing that is colouring in. So I was never upset by that, and I
yeah.
didn't feel like my industry was being called into question. So actually, I always thought it was quite funny that people would say that, because that's although on the one hand it might seem like there's not any respect. I think I always liked the banter, particularly with sales, and I always
Yeah,
felt like that was really important in marketing. So I
definitely.
think if that type of relationship helps you build relationships within the organization to support the things that you do, then it's valid. So I don't think people saying things to try and wind you up in itself is a bad thing, if actually that's coming from a place of you're one of us, and you're kind of one of this, and certainly for me, I've always wanted to sit in sales teams and with sales teams,
Mm,
and actually thrived off that kind of banter, and helping to redefine their perception of what marketing is as well. Because I
yeah.
think a lot of the time, the kind of misconceptions that people have come from bad experiences,
Yes,
and
yes.
I think that, I think a lot of the kind of reputational challenges that marketing has been caused by marketing people, bad marketing
Mm,
people.
yes, yeah.
um and and I think the reality is there's a lot of people who claim to be good at marketing who don't really have a lot of kind of skills or experience in that
Mm,
area,
yeah,
and they don't share that vulnerability up front, because everybody's trying to appear like they know more than they really
yeah,
do, and they don't
yeah.
feel confident yet, presumably because they're more junior, in saying when they don't know, they don't say they don't know.
Mm,
And that leads to a lot of issues of implementing things where they're not
further down the
necessarily the right
line.
thing,
Mm,
but it gets found out later in the line, and then either a lot of money's been spent or a lot of time's been spent delivering against something that doesn't quite work. So it might be that you could imagine this kind of imaginary meeting whereby the MD or the CEO is sitting around with some senior management people, and then this kind of junior marketing person gets called in saying, look, I really want to enable the sales team with kind of better campaigns and better collateral. So I'm here to say, do you need any budget to do this? Because actually, there's a really good agency that I met at this event last week, and they've been working with
mm,
X, Y, and Z. They've got a pretty good track record in doing this. Or do you feel comfortable doing this?
yeah,
And actually, I think a lot of marketing people are put in that situation and feel
yeah.
so
Mm,
vulnerable to say that they
they
feel
don't.
like they need some help. They don't. And then they take on. They don't have the capacity and skills and experience to be able to implement that, which then fails, which then leaves everybody in the organization with this feeling that they've wasted this time and effort on marketing, or that marketing doesn't deliver anything, or that
Mm,
marketing's just
point.
kind of a nice to have. So I think a lot of people's misconceptions around marketing are based on really valid bad experiences with marketing. And I think I've not really come across anybody who's inherently against marketing people for any other reason other than they've had bad experiences.
Yeah.
And I think as a profession, I actually don't think we have an issue with people's perception. I think we have an issue in kind of that vulnerability and honesty. And I think
Definitely.
it's only as you get older you kind of realize, actually, this is my ego talking here, but this is not reality, and you kind of learn to know when to acknowledge that's your ego rather than reality. And I'm sure I was totally the same, Gemma. I'm sure back in that sink and swim time that had I been offered help, I'd have probably said I'm a complete expert in Dreamweaver, which was the web thing that you used at the time. Wow. Don't need any help. I know what I'm doing, having probably no idea what I was doing. So I think there is a kind of thing that comes with over time, this this kind of comfort of, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. Actually saying I don't know is actually a really powerful thing to say, and that actually further validates times when you say yes and no, because people get greater confidence over that. Definitely, so if you actually accept the times and things that you don't know, and kind of concentrate on things that you do, then you can develop skills and relationships here, but also kind of deliver excellence over here. So I mean, I think in terms of misconceptions of marketing, I've actually probably not come across them too many, but I think one area that everybody could do more is particularly around that integration with sales. And I think those individuals that don't recognize either the importance of the sales function or the sales process as part of an integrated function are the ones that fail. And those that get it and commit and proactively build relationships at all levels within sales are the ones that are successful. Definitely. And that sometimes can come across as, well, marketing don't know the numbers. But if you're working with sales, you kind of don't really need to know the numbers. And that's what the bit that they can help with, So it might be that you don't need to know the numbers. You just need to be able to build the relationships to get the numbers. Yes, definitely. And to work that together. So it's
I think also that there's that insight, because sales are, prospecting, they talk to a lot of prospects, customers, clients, whatever that might look like. And it's kind of feeding that back into marketing and say, look, these are the challenges that they're facing. And because I'm a firm believer of that whole kind of sales alignment. And I think it's critical for just both teams to work together. And I think going back to the whole education piece around marketing, it is an education piece. People need to understand that's marketing's role, that's sales role, and it's for everyone to kind of just be abreast of kind of what that role is, what that function does, and how it supports the organization with what they do. And I think going back to your point before, I think just an analogy would be, it's a bit like applying for a role or going for a role and you have no knowledge of what that role expects from you, and you just can't do what that role expects from you, but you're going to go for it anyway and get employed, and then somewhere down the line, you're not able to add the value and to actually execute on what's expected. And I think in the long run that just causes all sorts of havoc.
Totally agree. And I think there's not a lot of benefits in getting older, but I think that's one thing that, assuming that you're mindful and you're kind of looking at yourself and being open to the fact that, what's my role in this? How could I have behaved differently? What can I do to help support this thing happening that I want to happen? So you kind of need to get internally focused from that perspective of thinking about yourself and your role in the universe, but actually recognize the times when that gets in the way as well. And actually times when you need to remove this feeling of self from the situation, because actually all you're doing is getting in the way. And that, that's some, I don't think there are any shortcuts. I'm superbly impressed by, how sensible these young people are these days, because as I shared quite vulnerably earlier, all I wanted to do was go out the weekends and get hammered. And when I see these like sober young people now who are doing all of this like meditation and stuff, I just think, wow, I was like actually pretty close to joining the army, because I thought like I needed that to sort me out. And that was like how bad it got for me, because I actually just was so lost that I didn't know that anybody else could fix me other than these kind of tough corporal people within the armed forces. But I suspect that they probably kicked me out straight away, because I was not able to to function as a young person, really.
Mm.
Whereas these young people now, they just seem so much more mature. But
Definitely, definitely. I was going to actually say, like, for my next question would be like, for someone that's looking to get into marketing, what advice would you give them?
yeah, I mean, the starting point for this would be this is a horrific time to be getting into marketing generally, and arguably probably the worst time to be getting into marketing. So I think probably the first thing I would say is think carefully about it if that's what you want to do. And I think the central kind of notion behind that is, as someone, I've been kind of writing about AI now for about 10 years, and it was always the case that the creative industries was always supposedly the one that was difficult to touch for automation and technology from an AI perspective, because we don't really understand how the human brain works. So how can we understand how creativity works? And actually, is marketing people and processes are so brilliantly creative that we're not in any way able to emulate that, because we don't, through AI models, because we don't understand it. And that was, I mean, I don't think any commentators at that time could have been any more wrong, because the first thing that appears to be completely disrupted and transformed in marketing is AI. And so much has happened in the last 7 months around the production of images, production of copy and content from a writing perspective, and moving video. And we've got these discrete tools, but we've also now got it in Adobe and Canva and Google Docs and HubSpot, and all these other tools are just going to continue to bring that within the tools we already use. So I don't think there's any future whereby, so let's just say it does, these processes help make us humans more efficient, and that efficiency, let's just say it's 50%, which seems quite low, but let's just assume it helps to spend 50% less time doing marketing,
doing stuff
in terms of the actual kind of processes associated with that. Then that's either half the income for agencies, or it's half the people needed in internal teams, or it's kind of half the investment effectively in marketing, because so that's a very conservative kind of estimate. And I'm not saying that's where we are now, but I can't help but to feel, once people have overcome some of these kind of issues around data and around federated access and all of that stuff, I mean, I just can't help but to feel that it's going to be one of the most heavily disruptive industries. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there's not going to be marketing people, of course, but in a sector where there's going to be considerably less people, then the demand for those roles goes up. And obviously marketing is a ridiculously popular area for people to want to get into, especially with social nowadays. Young people spend so much time on social, like all they want to do is get a job in social, whether that's as an influencer or a content producer. So I think there's a kind of like almost a buyer beware with the degrees and stuff as well, is just really thinking about that. So I think there's an element of young people are going to have to think about, where do I, what do I actually want out of life? Because I think this idea of going to Bali and being paid to copyright for other people, like, that's going to work for some people, but it's going to be a lot less. Because the very depressing reality, Gemma, and no marketing people like to accept this, is that the vast majority of stuff that we as a profession produce is average. And I'm not saying that's reflective of our work and the things that we do, or reflective of you and the work that you do. We all like to think our work is way above that, but the reality is a lot of organizations, they're just doing the basics really well, or the bar is so low that actually for them it's just about doing content that's good enough. And kind of this idea that at the moment individuals produce a lot of that content, and I can't imagine that anybody else is going to be producing this sea of mediocre content other than tools themselves. And so I think there's an element of, do I want to get into marketing, as in, like, is this a profession that I really want to go into? And if I was assuming you're starting an undergraduate degree, you've got 3 years of change that will happen during that time. And what state is marketing going to be in by the end of those 3 years? I don't know. And anyone who predicts that is a brighter mind than me. But assuming that people can kind of just accept that things change and they can't control it, and they feel that they've got a unique perspective in terms of how they think or whatever, when they're not just doing marketing for the sake of it because it sounds good.
Yes, yeah, that's I think that's a valid point. I think you're going back to your why. I think people shouldn't embark on a journey if there's no real kind of thought or why behind it. Like, why do you want to
Mm,
get into marketing? Why do you want to get into finance? That kind of thing. Because like you said, it's time, some of you have to start from ground level and work your way up, and it's kind of like really considering that time that you have to take in order to do that. And I think from your experience and your story, you've had to learn from the ground up and get involved in all sorts to kind of come to where you've got now. So it's very much so for anybody, and even like older people
mm,
looking to kind of go into a different career. It's about really understanding what's in it for them,
mm.
what's important, what do they want to prioritize. And I think that kind of leads into my next question about work-life balance. Um, you touched upon there, I think you mentioned before about just rat race.
Mm.
Probably some people might refer to it as the hamster wheel, whatever you'd like to refer it to, but currently, how do you manage work-life balance? Do you manage it?
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, there's no, every week and every day and every month is different. And this is the reality, I think, of running, being involved in a small business of any size, right? Is sometimes you've not got, you're so busy, you've not got enough people and need more hands on deck and you're working loads. Other times, you're effectively kind of giving out CVs in Costa to try and kind of generate some more income. So there's never the finest balance, I don't think, when you're either as a freelancer or a consultant or a small business kind of providing professional services. You've never quite got the right amount. Obviously, we always prioritize having too much to do because we kind of have mortgages to pay and bills to pay. So you kind of often take on more than you probably should or could to do that. I think my perspective has really been based, I think, on, and I'm extreme kind of, when we talk about work-life balance, I'm on the extreme life perspective now.
Yeah.
But that's come from a perspective of, not, I don't think I was overworking. I just didn't have the right job to suit what I wanted out of life, and I'd never really thought about it. I was just kind of like, right, we need to just earn more money because we need a house and we want to be able to go on holiday and blah blah blah. Just trying to be a good person, I guess, and husband, and trying to be a good dad. But actually, it's that kind of thing around realization that actually the kids, they just want to see you and spend time with you and experience life together. At that age, you just got to kind of immerse yourselves in those relationships, really. So nowadays I'm more on the extreme kind of life balance. And I think one central notion behind this has been, certainly it used to be, and I don't know whether you feel this has kind of changed over time, but people used to use the term lifestyle business as being a real, I mean, it was a pretty bad thing to say to somebody, to say, oh, it's just a lifestyle business, like they can't be asked to grow the business. Was pretty much what they were trying to say, and they were too lazy to grow the business. And for me now, I think what better business than a lifestyle business that actually fits around the things that you want to do,
Yeah.
the relationships that you have, your commitments in terms of relationships and family and all of that stuff. But also, what's important to you. I spent a lot of time to one of my friends who's now working in somewhere within quite a large kind of global telecoms vendor. He's obsessed with golf, and he was like, "I will just need to make golf my job." And we worked through it over a couple of months. We used to just talk about this life in general, and actually, came to the realization that working in the golf industry would actually give him less time to play golf, which is the thing he wanted to do. And actually, it's a little bit like the McDonald's analogy of, well, actually, you like eating McDonald's, but if you work in there, you probably don't want a burger every
You
day.
want a burger
So,
every day, yeah.
so actually, you've got to really think deeply about what you want out of life and the things you like doing. And some things are really seasonal. So I live 20, 30 minutes away from the Peak District, and I want to be able to go during the day in the summer and go and walk. Because realistically in the winter you can do it, but it's more of a kind of endurance mindset challenge rather than a nice walk to look at nature and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think for me now, a lifestyle business is something that everybody should aspire to rather than be ashamed of. And for me, as unashamedly now, prioritize the family and the kids. And I actually can co-parent now. So my wife will drop the kids off at school. I'll go and pick them up. So I'll organize meetings up to and including 3 o'clock. I will do calls after that, but it's 4 o'clock once I've got back after the kids. And it's kind of prioritizing those seem like the small things, but trust me, if you've never done it, there's no better thing than being stood there at the school gates when the kids are young and seeing their face when they see you. They're so happy to see you.
Aww.
And yeah, you're just doing the same drive or the same walk, to and from school every day. But those little moments, they don't last forever. And it's kind of, my son's now 9. I'm already now not sure whether we like each other or not now. We've got older, but we seem to wind each other up. But we've had some great moments, and I know him so deeply now that I still love him to bits. And whether in another 2 years' time he tries to assassinate me or not during my sleep, then we've shared some brilliant kind of moments together. But that's part of that deeply knowing somebody, and often he'll tell me things about myself that are really, really valid and really, really kind of pointy, and I'll do the same thing. I just know him so deeply now as people.
That's
and I
brilliant.
think that there's a lot of value for that, better or worse, in relationships. But yeah, so I think for me it's kind of like doing the co-parenting properly, and it's just been such a rewarding thing to do, and I've compromised and sacrificed a lot of money in doing so. I'm definitely earning less now than I was 7 years ago. But do you know what? I'm not crying anymore in float tanks, and that's a great thing.
And how does Sheffield United Football Club come into the mix of things?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So I think a lot of being a well-intentioned parent is, if you've got any skills to volunteer, then obviously you kind of get roped into doing stuff. So my thing as a kid, I think the reason that was so terrible academically and stuff is all I wanted to do was play football when I was a kid. And I was kind of just one of these young people who dreams of these, these kind of like becoming this professional footballer. And I had experiences, growing up that might have led me down that path. It turned out I wasn't good enough in the end, and didn't have the right mindset, I don't think, to make that leap professionally. But, I had some good coaching and played to a good standard. So obviously, as you get with these kids joining these clubs, they're always looking for volunteers, of people to help run these things. So I kind of walked into coaching my son's football team, and that reconnected, I think, a love for football. So yeah, effectively been volunteering in a lot of different areas of football, just with endeavors of trying to help young people reach their full potential, really.
Nice.
So yeah, so basically kind of started off as coaching, and then went into talent ID with Sheffield United, and continued to coach. So I'm starting my UEFA B this coming season. So that's quite a decent qualification in football. So yeah, I enjoy doing it. It's teaching me a lot about people. If you can work with a group of 15, 10-year-olds, then working with a group of 3 or 4 executives now seems easy. When you go into these meetings, when you've had to make sure that 12 to 15 kind of 10-year-olds find a way to coexist together, going in and building business cases and getting things over the line now is the easiest thing I do. So it's a real, it's a lot around teaching. It's a lot around understanding learning styles, and also being inclusive, because everybody's got kind of a different genetic makeup and a different brain chemistry, and trying to kind of unite that together is really challenging. So I've learned a lot about different learning styles and those visual learners and stuff, and it's back to that hearts and minds stuff earlier as well. It's real trying to sell an idea to 12, 10-year-olds who just want to run around and kick each other is really will teach you a lot about public speaking as well. So
incredible.
Yeah, it's really it's been something that's been very rewarding to do, and I continue to
do that.
to like doing it, and again, it gets me outside, which is great when we just sit on the laptop all week, just
when you're at your desk and whatnot. My next question would be like, what's your passion and what drives you? And I think if I look back over the conversation today, I think there's some nuggets that I could pull out as to what your passion is and what drives you. And I think you've just touched upon it there now. Like, being able to kind of be around young people and kind of really kind of, like you said, unlocking their potential and kind of being that mentor to them sort of through football. But yeah, what's your passion in life, and what drives you?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be honest, Jim. I don't really know. In terms of what I don't have is a bigger picture purpose, and I think my main failing, I think, from a business perspective, is over time I've always preferred quality interactions and quality time and quality experiences over kind of materialistic targets. And what I mean
Right.
by that is, I've got some customers, by the way, who are the best entrepreneurs. And for them, work is kind of everything, and they've been able to motivate themselves to double the size of their business every year, and they say they're going to do something, they do it. They've got a 3, 5, 10-year plan commercially, and for me, one of the main personal obstacles to overcome is like this. There's an inherent thing with capitalism generally in kind of this desire to grow. Nobody just wants to stand still, so people are willing to give you money to work or as a customer, but you've got to grow. And if you stand still, that's bad. And if you go backwards, you're basically evil. So it's kind of a central notion. And for me, that's always been really interesting that, like, no one ever gets to 250 employees and thinks, actually, it's just perfect.
This is good.
So what I
This
need
is
to do
good.
now is look after the ones I've got, deliver great service. And we need to add another 10% every year to cope with the churn. But I'm happy, and everybody's happy, and the customers are happy, and my people are happy, and my
That's all
family
that
are happy, and
matters.
I'm happy, and blah blah blah. People go, actually, this is no good, because investors want growth, and there seems to be an inherent thing in leaders that they want to stand up and tell everybody they're growing, and they go on LinkedIn and tell everyone they're growing. And that's been my main personal failing, I think, is over time is kind of dealing with the, for me, materialistic things are not important, as you can see with my son's gaming headset and a Mountain Warehouse hoodie. Is I don't generally value those things, and I have a car that works, which is 6 years old, and I'm not going to buy another one. When it dies, I'll buy another one.
You'll buy another one, yeah.
No, I don't have any aspirations to grow my personal possessions, and what's important to me is meaningful interactions. So, that might be meaningful interactions through work. It might be, supporting this football team. It might be actually getting more time to do stuff, outside of that with friends. So that,
And family
I'm
as well.
kind
You
of,
mentioned that before as well.
I'm kind of accelerate. I've gone past the midlife crisis, and I'm kind of like pretty much somebody who's on the deathbed, but still feels quite vibrant in kind of like, I feel like, people should, work to live a little bit more, maybe, in terms of how. And I think it's totally fine to like your job, to do a good job, and on 5 o'clock on Friday is go and do something that you really want to do. And there's no shame in that. And I think there seems to be this ideology that you have to take to LinkedIn on a Monday and say, if you don't love your job, if you were not lying in bed last night thinking about your first meeting, then you're basically a poor excuse for a human being. And I think that's the biggest
it's very true.
BS
It's
out there.
very it's very true.
95% of people fall in the category of
they
want a job that they enjoy, that they're quite good at, that gives them the income they want to go on holiday a little bit,
that's fine.
maintain a house and a lifestyle, and try and be there for the kids. And that's effectively what most people want, and there's no shame in that. And actually, that's a cornerstone of global industry, is people doing that. It's, the 5% of people who say that, 4% of them are lying, and 1% of them are going to be billionaires. So support them wholeheartedly, and hopefully they'll give me some cash to help their businesses grow. But for me, it's quality over quantity. What is it you're doing? And does that make you feel good? And does it help other people, and does it make them feel good? That's probably for me
a lot of nuggets there. I think there's a lot of things for people to sit with, I think, from looking over this podcast and actually kind of taking in, like, what's your why, and it's kind of, the value that you bring. And you said, quality over quantity, and it's very valid. And I think it's about what you want. It's not what about you want. It's not what about I want. It's about what the person wants, and whatever that may look like, as long as they're happy and content, then that's, tick. That's
absolutely
and perfect. Which
and I think there's a lot.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, go on. I was just probably going to end up repeating what I'd already said. So.
No, that's fine. It's fine. So it leads me on to my next question, which is there somebody that inspires you, dead or alive?
In terms of inspiration, I mean, I don't, and this again is probably another massive failing of what I do, but I don't tend to think too much about what other people and what they've done, and that's not to say I couldn't learn a lot from them. That's just a mindful choice, I think, not to kind of spend too much time thinking or looking at what other people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think when I was younger, I used to do that, and obviously there's been, as you progress through work, there's people that really help you, and there's individuals that
Yeah.
go out of the way to help you,
Yeah.
and and I think that's important. So there's kind of this mentoring thing that happens, for you as a person, and particularly through a professional lens. There's just those, everybody just has those 3 or 4 people that really connect with them and they really help them. So for me, I mean, in terms of people that inspire me, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think at the time in which I went through this kind of emotional breakdown and reshaped my life, I was massively overweight and basically unhappy and just drinking loads and stuff. So I went through a bit of a journey of self-discovery at that time, and listened to a load of the kind of podcast stuff at the time. And I think, the Tim Ferriss type stuff was really
Yeah.
important at that time for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But what I found after 2 years was kind of, no matter how many you listen to, it's just the regurgitation of the same ideas. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
take a lot of stuff when you go through this journey of self-improvement. I think you take a lot of stuff around diet and kind of nutrition and exercise and mindset and all of that stuff, and you keep it and you shape it. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's been a lot of people that have inspired me at various times.
Very time. Yeah. That makes
Now
sense.
I'm by no means a perfect individual, but I think I've got to a point where I'm kind of content
Yeah.
with who I am. And it's back to what you said before, Gemma. It's just trying to be a good person, and trying to be positive and be open-minded. So,
Yeah.
and just giving people a space to be themselves as well is something that I'm more important. It for me is more important now than, okay, what's this thought leader doing? How do they think about the world?
Yeah.
And I think that then kind of takes you down their path rather than your own. So I'm
Yes.
kind of,
Yes. Yeah.
better or worse now, I'm just kind of just happy to just keep evolving and changing my own self based on my own self critique and feedback that happens all the time. And I'll play, my wife laughs because I'm constantly talking to myself. I'm playing conversations through in my mind quite often, just based on, okay, this has happened and how could I have done this differently, or preparing for a conversation. So there's a lot of internal work goes on that will probably lead to a medical diagnosis at some point in the future. But I'm just happy being, just
Being
happy being
you.
myself,
Yeah.
and just,
And showing up as you're doing, right? Showing up as you are, and and
just doing your best,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
doing the best, and sometimes
Exactly.
not doing your best and being fine with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. My next question would be like, if you had a chance to be a superhero or have superpowers, what would that be and why?
Oh, I
Or
don't
who would that
know.
be and why? Or what superpowers would they be?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never really thought too much about this, to be honest. But I think, yeah, I think off the cuff, that the Doctor Strange stuff's probably pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
just being able to create these alternate dimensions that you can put people in, so you can kind of curate your life by creating alternate dimensions to put people that aren't congruent with, kind of niceness in society, and potentially some of these people that just want to do harm and put badness out in the world. We can kind of create that, or this alternate reality for those people to live in, and that then frees up the rest of the people who are just trying to be good people to coexist together, I think. So that's the one that springs to mind. I don't think, when I was a kid, I used to dream, my persistent dream when I was a kid was flying. But I've got over that now. Quite happy being a land-born mammal.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I've got a few more, just two more questions to ask. If you had to ask the audience a question for those listening in, or that perhaps download the podcast, or whatever, or on YouTube, what would that be? What question would you ask them?
Hmm. Why are you here? That's probably
It's a
the
very
one
good
thing that
question.
springs to mind. So that's kind of related to what you were saying before, Gemma, about the why. But I think a lot of the time the why becomes tainted too much with thinking about other people. So
Yeah.
they shortcut the self and move on to their role in doing this other stuff. And it's an exercise that I've done, and I started with a blank piece of A3. I just started listing things that are important to me, and I just kind of created this mind map of stuff that was important. And then I just left it for a week and then came back to it, re-looked at it again, and then I was kind of like, well, okay. And it was really interesting exercise because it allowed me to then think, well, actually, this is supposedly important to me, but I'm not doing anything on this. Actually, this theme keeps coming up, but there's no room in my life to do this thing, or it brought into question a lot of things that I thought I was doing for the right reasons, but weren't actually congruent with what I needed to do. And I think that certainly for me, that became a case of health being really super important. I've covered that a couple of times earlier, but I think any well-intentioned parent starts with they feel like they need to write kids down first, but it actually you need to be alive and thriving to be there for your kids,
support them.
So actually, if all you write is, "Oh, my kids are so important," but you're in and out of hospital all the time, then that's no good. So you've got to be alive and there to be able to be a good parent. So it's kind of things like that that I'd gone through, and I'm sure everybody's journey is different. But I'd really, I think I'd want people to take away from this, hopefully, that there's no right or wrong way to live life, and you shouldn't be ashamed of what you do or don't do, assuming that you're not bringing hurt or pain to other people. And I think as long as you're not affecting other people negatively in the things you say and do, then you should do what you want. And that I think, to loop that back to what we were talking about earlier, for maybe young people looking to enter marketing, is you're doing it because you really want to do it, or you're doing it because you want to sit on a Friday night with your friends and say, "Oh, I work in social media." Yeah. What do you do? What do you do? Like that can't work really. And I think in an increasingly competitive market, it's not going to work. So you're going to need a real strong sense of purpose around that to get you through that and the challenges that are there. So I would say, for people of all ages, whether you're 18 or 65, it's not too late to think about what you want to do and why you're doing it, and to change, because we're in a crazy world of opportunity. And I think I think we're going to get more people who seem like they're going crazy of just basically quitting this high-flying corporate job and going back to making stuff with the hands. And if you've always wanted to be a florist, why not be a florist?
It's a great gardener or whatever that might look like.
So I think there'll be a real opportunity over the coming years with all of this change for people to just do the things that make them happy, and do the things they want to do that makes them happy. So that would be my one thing that I'd want people to take away is, why are you here? What's the purpose behind your existence? And that doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah, that makes sense. My last question was any final words to share, but I think from that there's a lot of nuggets in just that. And like, what question would you like to ask the audience? But any final words?
No, not at all. I mean, I would say it might come across this podcast as being like I'm kind of negative about marketing. I mean, far from it. I think marketing's a superb place to be if you can get there. I just foresee a more difficult pathway in getting there for most people.
That makes sense.
If you want it hard enough, and certainly when you're young, we're quite fortunate, I guess. I've got to kind of being in my early 40s now, and did reasonably well when I was younger, and that allows you, when I talk about being able to go to the woods and whatever, that's coming from a position of privilege that I've had to work hard for over time, and having come from a single parent family and having to self-fund all of the qualifications I've ever done, I've had to pay for myself, and I didn't do it first time around, so I had to do it all through night school while I was working and stuff. So I've worked hard to get to this point. So I think that probably the other takeaway for people is, if you're earlier on in your career, don't mistake what I'm saying as being you can kind of just mess around for 3 hours a day and do some kind of work on yourself and you'll be successful. I think you're going to have to work disproportionately hard when you're younger, and building a reputation over time and getting to a point where people want to pay you a good salary or pay you money to look after their marketing requires a disproportionate amount of effort up front. So I did want to kind of share that, because on reflection of a lot of what I've just said, it kind of sounds like, well, this guy's just spending all of his time thinking about life and just kind of, is happy to have this kind of lifestyle business. But I think to get to that point, you need to have done a lot of work initially, and there's a level of financial security that comes in being able to do that. So I think that's probably the thing, is kind of chapters, and take this as being, this is, I'm someone who's now 41 years of age, and I've done quite a lot over the last 20 years to bring me to this point. So this is my current thinking. If you'd have asked me another 6 or 7 years ago, I'd have probably been drinking coffee on the call and going crazy about wanting to change marketing. And if you'd have asked me 6 years before that, I'd have probably been in Ibiza. So you need to take these chapters of the story in what it is. This is my moment in life as a 41-year-old, and the realizations that I've come to now. But you don't get to where I am without doing all of the other stuff first.
Oh no, I just wanna thank you, Daley, for coming on the podcast. I mean, it's been very refreshing, a lot of the things that you touched upon today, and I think that's the whole purpose behind this podcast. There's no airs or graces, or there's no kind of, oh no, you can't say that and that's wrong. I think it's about individuals. It's about sharing their story, what they're about, what they bring to the table, and it's just really raw. Like there's no fluff, as I like to call it. So this is
I'm done with that
example.
now. Yeah, I mean, what I would hope is that the people I work with and the relationships I hold would probably tell you, like, the integrity and kind of living your own brand, if you like, is important. And that doesn't mean swearing every other word. It just means just be honest and vulnerable when you need to be honest and vulnerable. Be honest and vulnerable. When you've got something to say it, but when you haven't, don't. And it's just it's trying to live with intent, really, around that. So I would hope that the kind of raw bits have not been, I'm not going to dress things up to be something that they're not, and I think we should celebrate areas where other people are doing really well, and kind of acknowledge and recognize your own weaknesses as well, because I think that's part of just that humility. Also helps build relationships as well, and it helps other people be more comfortable with who they are as well, which I think is a good thing in today's society.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Daley, for your time today. And it's been wonderful having you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
No, it's brilliant. Well, you've been a great host, Gemma, and I'm sure that in what you're doing with this podcast, there's not a lot of people doing what you're doing in itself, as giving up the time to try and help other people who are on this journey of life, and particularly through a marketing and sales lens. So I think what you're doing is going to be really of service to people, and keep going.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Okay, see you later.
Bye.